Okay, back to work. PlatformSutra. The full title of this sutra is the Maha Prajna Paramita Sutra of the direct teaching of the Southern School of the Supreme Mahayana, the Platform Sutra. That's actually the official title in the Chinese Tripitaka. The Maha Prajna Paramita Sutra of the direct teaching of the Southern School of the Supreme Mahayana, the Platform Sutra. And this title expresses something about the sutra that's actually very important historically in Zen. That this sutra advances the Mahaprajna Paramita teachings as being at the heart of Zen. It sort of says, from now on, these are the teachings that we hold to be central for our school, for our tradition. Teachings that are expressed in the Diamond Sutra and also in the Heart Sutra that we chant in all of our retreats, because the Heart Sutra is chanted in all Zen temples all over the world, from Japan to China to Brazil to Colombia to South Africa. There are Zen groups in all these places, everywhere, many countries in the world. Always the Heart Sutra is chanted because the emptiness teachings are at the heart of our way of practice. And this was not always the case. That's why the Sixth Ancestor Sutra is so important, because before this, the main teachings that were studied and practiced in Zen were the teachings of the Lankavatara Sutra and other teachings, but it seems like, from what little we know, as we're understanding the history of the tradition in China before the time of the Sixth Ancestor, it seems that the Lankavatara Sutra was the text, and its teachings were the teachings that were handed down. And actually, it's an important detail in the story of Huineng, which I didn't exactly tell you because I assume most of you know about it. You could read it in the sutra. But anyway, in the story that I just briefly alluded to, I remember I told you about the two poems that were written. Well, in the story it says that there was this big wall in the monastery that was they had hired a famous painter, Chinese brush painter, to come in and paint this whole wall with scenes from the Lankavatara Sutra. But instead, on the wall was Huineng's 4-line verse, instead of this vast, complicated depiction of the Lankavatara Sutra. We had this very simple 4-line verse written by an illiterate person. So that's kind of the contrast, the direct, simple versus the complicated and the ornate and the elaborated. And the Lankavatara Sutra is a very complicated sutra about the mystical cultivation of the mind, the step-by-step, all the different mystical states of mind and so on that can be cultivated through meditation. That was the understanding earlier until this Sixth Ancestor teaching. But the emptiness teachings are, very simple and direct. I mean, they're reduced in the Heart Sutra to 1 page. A short page of text is a reduction of the whole of the emptiness teachings, which basically come down to the saying that we chant all the time, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. It's very direct. It's very much about what's right in front of us, here and now. What is empty? What is emptiness? Just look in front of you. What's right in front of you? That is the profound teaching of emptiness. What is literally right in front of you, inside and outside. And what is it that's right in front of you, inside and outside? It's not what you think it is. It's empty. It's unspeakable. It's unknowable. It's ineffable. And it's just what's right in front of you, no more and no less. This is an astonishing teaching. So, in his talk in the sutra, Huineng explains, he starts out, like all good Dharma teachers, by talking about the title of the sutra. So he talks about what do the words mean, Maha, Prajna, Paramita. So I thought I would read you what he says about this. He says, in talking about the word Maha, which means usually simply translated as great, great Prajna Paramita Sutras. So what does the word Maha, great, mean? Our nature contains the 10,000 dharmas. That's how great it is. 10,000 dharmas is the way that the Chinese say everything. So what is our nature? It includes everything. That's how great your nature is. And the 10,000 dharmas are our nature. To see humans and non-humans, both the good and the bad, both the good and the bad, good dharmas and bad dharmas, without rejecting them and without being corrupted by them, is to be like space. This is what great means. This is what Maha means. To be like space, accepting everything, not rejecting the good or the bad. There's a fascicle of Dogen, one of my favorites, which is translated into English, the title translated into English as All-Inclusive Study. And here, that's what Huineng is talking about, the all-inclusive practice of Maha, which is our nature. And the example is often given of space, which is an astonishing thing. I mean, what is space? It's exactly nothing. I mean, there isn't any. Space is what contains anything, but by itself, it isn't anything. It's a strange thing, space. Anything that we could see or ever conceive of in the physical world would be something that exists in space, here, on this planet, or anywhere else. And yet, space is exactly not anything. But it's all-inclusive. Space welcomes any object, not just some objects, but all objects. So this is like our fundamental nature, radically all-inclusive. All-embracing, all-encompassing, not knowing anything about rejection or exclusion. So Huineng says we have to be like this, to embrace everything. That's to be true to our nature. And he says very explicitly, the good and the bad. Now, we know the difference, between the good and the bad. We see, the bad leads to a lot of pain. The good leads to happiness. And we don't want pain for ourselves or others, and we do want happiness for ourselves or others. So it's clear the difference between the good and the bad and what we would choose and what we would not choose. Nevertheless, we don't demonize, reject, cast out the bad. We don't reject anything in ourselves or in others. Nor are we, as he says, corrupted by what's bad, turned around by what's bad in us or outside of us. So we don't reject anything or anyone, and yet we know the difference between good and bad, and we know what to do and what not to do. And we can support everything, love everything, without being caught up in it. This is to be like space. This is to act in accord with our nature as Maha. What does prajna mean? Prajna means wisdom. At all times, to keep your thoughts free of ignorance and always to practice wisdom. This is what we mean by the practice of prajna. One thought of ignorance, one thought, and prajna is destroyed. One thought of wisdom, and prajna pops back up again. A person whose mind is full of ignorance says, I'm practicing prajna. But prajna has no form. It's the nature of wisdom. So this sounds a little intimidating, at all times. Always, practice prajna. This seems completely impossible for an ordinary human being at all times, to be wise, to have a thought of clarity and wisdom. And it's also, kind of makes your heart sink, one thought of ignorance and boom, prajna is destroyed. But fortunately, one thought of wisdom and boom, it pops up again. And then, an ignorant person says, I'm practicing prajna paramita. Because if you're really practicing prajna paramita, you would recognize that prajna paramita is empty. There's nothing to it. So if you think you're practicing it, then that's a sure sign that you're not. Because, I have wisdom. You couldn't if you thought that. Because no one can be wise or possess wisdom. It's not a personal attribute or a skill. It's something that arises and passes away. Where someone is, maybe, but it's not someone's possession. And it can't even be exactly named or identified. As soon as you name it or identify it or say, there's wisdom, you've already destroyed it. So what would wisdom be then, if all this is true? What does this imply? What does this really mean, practically speaking, for our living? I think the wisdom that cognizes emptiness appears to us as a feeling of being connected to one another and to everything. A warm-hearted, big sympathy with what is inside our own hearts and outside of us. To be free of ignorance means to be free of this powerful confusion that we have that causes us to see ourselves as separate and at threat from the rest of the world. At home, when in Dharma seminar, when we were studying this sutra, I was away a lot, and so now at home in the Dharma seminar we have a number of other teachers who fill in for me. It's kind of nice, I don't even ever have to be there, and it all goes on. I'm looking forward to that. Disappearing completely is going to be a wonderful delight. Someday, this retreat will be going on, and I'll be a distant dream. I won't be here, and it will go on. So this happens even now. Sometimes I'm not there, and so anyway. But what happens is John Murray, who's a great Buddhist saint, John Murray, who's the one who puts all the Dharma talks, every word that I ever say, even if I'm at home, it's recorded. And it's all on the internet, it's on the website, because of John Murray. And his assistant saint is Ruth over here, who between the two of them have. You should see the Everyday Zen website. It's a miracle. If you ever, it's really. I'm impressed with it myself, and and it's really their work. Anyway, what John Murray does is when I'm not there, he records the talk, and then he drives to Muir Beach and puts it in my mailbox, so that before the next week of the seminar, I can listen as if I was there, to the seminar that I wasn't attending, so that I can know what was discussed. I can even hear the discussions. It's kind of great, and then I can refer to that in my following talk the next week. So while I was away, Jeff Bickner, who many of you know, gave the talk, and he had this great way of explaining emptiness, which I think he said he got from the Red Pine commentary. I don't know, but I keep attributing it to Jeff. Anyway, he said, emptiness is like a double negative. When we view ourselves, as we commonly do, we just take it for granted, as atomized individuals really apart from and over against a very complicated, looming reality that is very threatening. When we see ourselves this way, which we completely take for granted, this is already a negative. We've actually, in a sense, through our conditioning, willfully negated ourselves out of the picture of reality. And now we're over here. And the rest of reality is over here. And we've negated ourselves. And the emptiness teachings are a double negative. They negate the negation, and they put us back in to reality. All-embracing reality. That's part of us. That is who we are. We couldn't exist for a second, without the rest of reality. Without the air, without the earth, without one another, without our parents, without plants. There's no such thing as a human being. Literally. This is literally the case. So this double negative of emptiness puts us back in the picture where we have always been anyway, but we just painted ourselves over in a corner. So to practice wisdom then is to join up in sympathy with all that is. To see the emptiness of our holding ourselves apart, and to realize that it was never so, ever. And what does paramita mean? This is Sanskrit. In our language, Chinese, we say, what leads to the other shore, which means what transcends birth and death. When we are attached to objects, we give rise to birth and death, like when waves form on the water. This is what we mean by this shore. When we are free of objects, there is no birth and death, like when a river flows on forever and ever. So we say, this leads to the other shore. And this is what we mean by paramita. So he says here, to be free of attachments to objects. And you hear about this a lot in Dharma study, to be free of attachments to objects. And this is a very deceptive teaching, because from the standpoint of our single negative, where we're outside the picture, which is our usual point of view. We don't have to think about this. This is how we think. When we hear free of attachment to objects, this sounds like, we need to give something up. Darn, all these things people and things that I'm so attached to. I guess if I really want to do Dharma, I have to give these up. They always told me religion was hard. It had a lot of sacrifice, austere self-sacrifice. But when you think about it, it's only logical. You can only be attached to something that isn't already yours, that's outside of yourself, that you need to be attached to lest you would lose it. You need to hang on really tight lest it would disappear from you, right? That's the only thing you can be attached to. When we recognize our radical non-separation, our radical inclusion, there's no problem in being free from attachments. There's nothing to give up. There's no need to give anything up or sacrifice anything. Even if we're apart from each other forever and ever, we're still together. So, why would we ever need to be attached to anything? To be attached to something, in this pernicious sense, is already to have fallen out of intimacy with that thing. That's the only way you can be attached to something, right? Is if you're not in intimate connection with it. You have to be attached to it. But when you're not, when you realize that you're always connected, then there's no question of attachment. So it's not a matter of, not the way we think it is at all. And that's what paramita means. To be free of attachments. So I've chosen a few other passages beyond this that I want to comment on. This is comes a little later in the sutra as he's continuing to speak. He says, good friends, when I was with my teacher, Master Hongren, as soon as I heard his words, I experienced a great realization. And I saw the original nature of reality directly. That word again, directly, which is so important in this sutra. Therefore, I am passing on this teaching to later generations, so that those who study the way will realize enlightenment also directly, and so that those who contemplate the mind will realize their original nature directly. If you are unable to realize this by yourselves, you need to find a truly good friend to point out the way to see your nature. And what do I mean by a truly good friend? Someone who understands the teaching of the Supreme Vehicle, the Mahayana, the compassionate vehicle that includes everybody, and who points directly to the true path. That person who does that, who understands the teachings and who points directly to the true path, that's a truly good friend. That's a great intermediary, a guide who helps people see their own nature. All good teachings can come about due to truly good friends. The Buddhas of the 3 periods and the 12 divisions of the canon are fully present in this nature of yours. And if you can't see this by yourselves, then you need to find a good friend to show you how to see your nature. But if you realize this by yourself, you don't need to look for a good friend somewhere else. And if someone insists that you have to find a good friend somewhere else before you attain liberation, that place somewhere else doesn't exist. You will attain liberation when you meet the good friend inside your own mind. But as long as your mind is full of confusion, delusion, and mistaken views, even the instruction of an external good friend won't be able to save you. So, I think about this a lot as a person who's trying to be a good friend to others. I think about this passage. The good friend is actually inside your own mind. So I really appreciate this teaching. It takes a lot of pressure off, you know. And it helps keep me going, because I feel as if I'm not pointing anything out. I'm not teaching anything. All I'm trying to do is to be a placeholder, temporarily, for the good friend that is inside your own heart and mind. And somehow or other, it's a strange thing, but it seems to be that most of the time, human beings need another person to help us finally figure out that we don't really need that other person. That's the virtue of the other person. To see that actually there is no other person, then there never was. Somehow we need another person to point that out to us, not by pointing it out to us, but just by being willing to be there. And this is the sixth ancestor talking, and this is the way that we practice in Zen. Now, there are traditions in which spiritual masters have charisma, in the sense of special powers. You know, like I have a lot of friends who told me about how they went to see spiritual teachers and they got zapped with some kind of like thing. And they could feel it. You know, it wasn't just something that they read about. They felt it. You know, and I have no doubt that they're telling me the truth. These are honest people. They're not crazy. So that I know that they... There was one friend of mine, this is kind of funny, but it's true, that he would regularly get zapped by his teacher. It was a powerful thing that he experienced. But this would take place while the teacher was watching I Love Lucy reruns on TV. So the teacher would be sitting, like, say, where I'm sitting, and all the students would be sitting, say, where you're sitting, but behind the students would be a big TV screen. And he would be sitting there watching I Love Lucy reruns and absorbed in this, but all the students were like, you know, they were... And they have this also in Christianity, you know, where like Jesus himself was obviously had a powerful charisma that he could heal people and so forth. You know, I mean, people all the time go into revival meetings and they throw away their crutches and their, you know, somehow, in other words, individuals seem to have special connections to God that can be, and so they have power that can be conferred on others. It seems to be. So this is a great thing. Unfortunately, we don't have this. Sorry. If you were expecting this, I apologize. We don't have this. Zen masters are. It's a bad term, you know. Zen master. It kind of evokes this whole thing. And to be sure, I mean, there are Zen places where there is this sort of aura about the special charisma of the Zen master, even though that as we see here, this isn't actually the main thoroughfare of our tradition. Our main way is to be a good friend, in not to zap anybody or teach anybody anything, because who knows anything that much, you know, really. But to be there in someone's life as a good friend. And so there are nowadays, you know, with the miracles of science and the internet and how many smart people there are in the world, there are a lot of great spiritual masters flying all over the place. You know, there's spiritual masters with 10 million disciples that we've never heard of, because there's so many of them, you can't even keep track of them all. And they might appear in amphitheaters. 25,000 people could go, you know, and get zapped or whatever. But and I'm sure this is powerful. Obviously, 25,000 people are not stupid. If they go for a reason. So I think this is, a powerful thing. But this is different. This is something very simple. Just can we be in each other's lives based on the Dharma? So there's a value in this, in knowing one another, you see, knowing one another person to person over time. There's an alchemy in these relationships. And that's why, to me, I was talking to Kate and Michael about this, why it's so important that in Vancouver, now they're trained to be those people. Not zapping you. Probably they won't zap you any more than I will. But I don't know. Maybe they're zapping and I don't know about it. It's possible. But to be there with love for the Dharma and dedication. And in Bellingham, we have a priest who's willing to be there. And it doesn't have to be a priest. There are lay disciples also who are willing to have that spirit to be there for people. And so this is part of my work, is to so that when I evaporate, there'll be others who can be there in people's lives. And that's what he's talking about here. Not to be teaching anybody or doing anything, but just to be a placeholder for the good friend that is in your nature, each and every one of us, to find that good friend. So I'm very moved by that passage. And right after that, he says, your truest friend is the wisdom that rises within you. And with one realization, you become a Buddha right away. When inside and outside are perfectly clear. See, that's why you need the person outside to clarify inside and outside. You will know your own mind. And once you know your own mind, you will be free. And once you have gained your freedom, this is prajna. And the realization of prajna is no thought. So this no thought is a big term in Zen teaching. And no thought, it's a misleading term because it sort of conjures up that there's no thoughts in the mind. It doesn't mean that. It means not grasping and clinging to thoughts. So it's wonderful. Thinking is one of the great things. Actually, to think is just as great as sexuality, just as thrilling, actually, to just think a thought when it's not occluded by all of our confusion and grasping and aggression. So that's no thought, just thinking. Dogen says when he describes the practice of Zazen, think not thinking. That's what he's talking about. Freedom within thinking. Freedom within all, and thinking doesn't just mean thinking intellectually, it means everything that we feel, everything that arises in us, our emotions, our sensations, which is our life. This is our only life. Like somebody was talking to me about physical pain. But physical pain is actually a thought, right? Because pain, if you didn't have a mind and a consciousness, pain wouldn't hurt, right? You cut off your head and you don't feel any pain. It's because the pain comes from a place and sends a signal to your mind and your awareness, and then you say, oh, that hurts. So our whole life is thinking in this sense. So no thinking is having an open hand and allowing our lives to unfold without occlusion, without attachment, without cramping, just letting life flow like this great river he mentioned a few passages ago that just goes on, flowing on and on forever. Then, there's as I was saying before, one of the radical things about this sutra is that the sixth ancestor is constantly reinterpreting everything in Buddhism that people always took to be external. He's reinterpreting it all. Like the teacher, the great teacher, is not outside, it's actually inside. So now he's going to talk about the Western paradise, and a lot of us think that Buddhism is very rational and scientific and doesn't have heaven or hell or God or anything like that. But that's not really true. Buddhism has all of that stuff. Go to Asia and you'll see the same kind of piety that you can see in Mexico or Guatemala. So there are not only one heaven, but a whole variety of heavens that you can go to. It is true that in Buddhism the heavens are temporary, not permanent. But still, you can live there for several eons. That'd be long enough, So one of the most popular heavens and the most desirable heavens is the Western paradise. And the story about the Western paradise goes like this. As we have all noticed, it's very hard to practice. You practice over and over again, you feel you're not getting anywhere, you look at yourself, you're still very imperfect, and you think it's kind of hopeless. And you might even come to the conclusion that it's impossible. Because this world there's too many problems. You have to work for a living, if you have a family, there's many problems associated with that. If you don't have a family, there's many problems associated with that. There's money, the body doesn't work right, things happen. It would be much better to find a better place to practice, where you don't have these kind of problems, and you can really devote yourself to your spiritual activity all the time, where there isn't any money, where the body doesn't fall apart, where all these things. Well, that's the Western paradise. That's a place where you can really practice. So there are a lot of people decided that it's too hard to practice here, and it's stupid to waste your time doing that. So what you want to do is pray to Amida Buddha to be reborn in the Western paradise, because there it's much easier to practice, and you have a really great chance of attaining Buddhahood in the Western paradise. So in fact, the most important schools of Buddhism in China and Japan believe exactly this, and that's what they do. They pray to Amida Buddha to be reborn in the Western paradise, where then they will be able to practice without all these nagging difficulties that we have. Maybe they're right. I've considered this. And actually, it was a very common thing. I don't know about China, but I know in Japan it was a very common thing for Zen masters, when they got old and it was too hard for them to live in the monasteries where the heating was bad and the food was meager, they would retire and become believers in Western paradise and stop practicing Zen and pray for rebirth there. So, maybe not a bad idea. So in the middle of his talk, Huineng says to the assembled people, and I think it said at the beginning of the sutra, there are 10,000 of them. So big amphitheater, charismatic teacher, 10,000 people. He said to them, I will show all of you the Western paradise, now. And you won't leave here until you're free of doubt. He announced this all of a sudden in the middle of his talk, and the assembly was startled, and no one knew what was going to happen. So then he begins. He said, okay, listen carefully. Everybody's physical body is a city. Your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin are the gates of the city. These 5 gates are on the outside, and on the inside is the gate of the intellect, of the mind. Your mind is the kingdom, and your nature, your true nature, your Buddha nature, is the king or the queen. When your nature is there, so is the queen. When your nature is gone, the queen is gone too. When your nature is present, your body and mind are present. When your nature is absent, your body and mind cease to exist. The Buddha is the creation of your nature. So we created the Buddha by our nature. Don't look outside your body. Don't look outside your body. So, people are often surprised when they learn Zen meditation and it's all about breathing and feeling your body. And they're thinking, well, where's the spiritual part going to come in? Don't look outside your body. When you're blind to your own nature, the Buddha is an ordinary being. When you're aware of your own nature, an ordinary being is Buddha. I'm skipping a little bit. When poisonous thoughts end, the denizens of the deep vanish. When the Tathagata of your enlightened nature shines the light of wisdom on the land of your mind, the 6 gates shine with purity, the realms of the 6 desires become transparent, the 3 poisons disappear, the hells all vanish, inside and outside are perfectly clear, and this is the Western paradise. You're here right now. And this is the only way to practice. If you don't practice like this, how would you ever get there? So, that was his way of showing them the Western paradise right now. In other words, when you understand your nature, when you purify your mind and heart, you are right at the Western paradise now. And everybody is, it says here, they were so excited, their praises reached the sky when they heard this. Because they realized they didn't have to wait till later, to be reborn in the Western paradise. They could be reborn there right now. And then, they often say, like a little disclaimer, they say, don't try this at home, Well, the next thing he says is, you can try this at home. Now, when you think about it, the direct teaching that he's always emphasizing, why would you need to, if it's direct, if it's always right here, if the Western paradise is, right here and not at some distance in time or space, why would you need to go to a monastery and do all these things? And even though Zen has always been, up to then, a monastic tradition of intense, practice, abandoning all else, he says, you don't need to do that. And it makes sense, right? You wouldn't in this direct method. He says, so if you want to practice this, you can do this at home too. You don't have to go to a monastery. He says, it doesn't require living in a monastery. If you live in a monastery and you don't really practice the direct practice, then you're like people who live in the Western paradise, but their minds are confused, they might as well not be there. And if you practice at home, then it's as if you're in the Western paradise. You don't need to go somewhere else. As long as you resolve, and this is the operative word, as long as you resolve, as long as you're committed with full commitment to cultivating purity within yourself and finding out who you really are, that's the Western paradise. You don't need to be anywhere special. So then somebody says, well, how should we practice at home? And then he says, don't worry, I composed a poem for you. All you have to do is recite this poem and practice this, and that's all you need to do. And then he breaks into song. And he sings this poem, which I'm not going to do, but I'll read you some of the lines from it. And I won't sing it. Just imagine these words, with this beautiful Chinese accompaniment, that kind of haunting Chinese kind of singing. So, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it goes on for a while, but I'll read the parts that I think are most important, and you could read the rest yourself. There must be 10,000 ways to explain it, but all are based on one rule. In your dark house of afflictions, keep the sun of wisdom shining. Falsehood arises because of afflictions. So you're in your house of afflictions. It's okay to be there. Just keep the sun of wisdom shining. When truth appears, afflictions depart. Letting truth and falsehood be, there's nothing left to purify. It's kind of like his poem, there is no purity necessary. Because of this nature of your heart, of your mind, which has to do with letting truth and falsehood be. Letting virtue and defilement be. Enlightenment is already pure. It's already pure, but all our thoughts about it are confused. It's our thoughts, everything we think about awakening is confused, even though actual awakening itself is pure. But inside the confusion is purity. Once truth removes the three obstructions, if you follow the way in this world, let nothing block your path. Paying attention to your own mistakes will keep you in step with the way. So that's the practice, just to pay attention to your own mistakes. Not feeling guilty about them, wishing they weren't there, mad at yourself because they're there. She doesn't have these problems, he doesn't have these problems, why do I still have these problems? No, paying attention to those problems. Being with them. Following, they are the footsteps on the path. People who truly follow the way don't consider the faults of the world. Wow. People who follow the way don't consider the faults of the world. Those who consider the wrongs of the world only add to their own. I don't condemn the faults of others. My own wrongs are what I'm after. Just get rid of thoughts about wrongs, and all your afflictions will shatter. It's kind of startling, isn't it? And I think, when I first heard that, I thought, gee, that's pretty extreme. No, I mean, I think we would all agree that we do need to look at our own faults. It's not that we want to ignore them. And we don't want to be so focused, a person who only sees the faults of others and only obsessed with the conditions outside themselves and has no idea what's going on within themselves. It's clear to all of us, I think, that this is not a good strategy for living. But to say that we should only pay attention to our own faults and ignore the faults of the rest of the world, this seems a little extreme, to the point of being like completely so inwardly focused that we might be like mentally ill or something, But I think that there's more to this than meets the eye. I think we referred to a passage earlier, or maybe just now, I forgot, where it talks about clarifying inside and outside. So this is, a profound point. Our conceptual division of the universe into, there's two parts to the universe, right? Me and everything else. The universe divided in half. On one half of it is me, and the other half is everything else. I mean, this is how we live, right? There's something wrong with that. Doesn't seem right. Seems inaccurate and certainly problematic. Inside and outside, this division of the world in that way is not trivial. Obviously, it causes it's our whole lives. It's not trivial. But what's the nature of that distinction? And the emptiness teachings, when we get into them with some depth, tell us that that distinction is a distinction in language. It's a designation. It's an important designation built into the quality of human language and human thought, so it's not trivial, but it is a designation and not a substantial reality. So if we apply this here, we can understand that the sixth ancestor is telling us in these words something like this. If something is not right, you have to look deeply, deeply, deeply and find out where the fault really is. You have to realize that your fears and your confusions are part of what you're seeing. So you have to face those squarely in order to see what's going on. Practice being suspicious of your self-righteousness. Practice being suspicious of your analysis of others and who they are and what's wrong with them. And the world and what it is and what's wrong with it. And always look more closely at your own experience. Be more honest with yourself. And be more intimate with what's actually going on in your acts of perception and thought. See through and behind your views and your frameworks and your prejudices that you don't even know are there. And then, as he says later, all your problems will shatter and dissolve. And then you'll be able to deal with what's actually going on. This same kind of teaching is reflected in a little story that appears in the sutra, and this is the last passage that I'll share with you. I told you in the beginning that after, the present moment of the sutra is this ordination ceremony, which begins with a flashback of the story of the sixth ancestor's life, and then he does the ceremony and he gives a little Dharma talk, and then that's over, and then there's a bunch of encounter dialogues, and then the last days and death of the sixth ancestor. So this is from the section of the encounter dialogues, and I'll read you part of this encounter because it's interesting and there's a lot of important points in it. There was another monk by the name of Shenhui. He was from Nanyang, and he came to pay his respects, and he said, "When the master meditates, does he see or not?" Interesting question. And so Huineng got up and hit Shenhui 3 times. Whack, whack, whack. So then he says to Shenhui, "Okay, now let me ask you. When I hit you, did it hurt or not?" And Shenhui answered, "It hurt and it didn't hurt." And the sixth ancestor said, "Well, I see and I don't see." And Shenhui said, "What do you mean you see and you don't see?" And he said, "As for I see, what I always see are my own faults. So I say I see. And as for I don't see, what I don't see are the faults of others, either on earth or in heaven. So I see and I don't see. And what about you? What do you mean when you say it hurt and it doesn't hurt?" And Shenhui answered, "If it didn't hurt, I would be the same as a lifeless stick or a rock. And if it did hurt, I would be the same as an ordinary person, still subject to anger." So that's a little dialogue between them. And this line, I see and I don't see, was very important for my practice personally, because when I first read it many years ago, I took it on as a practice. And I can attest from personal experience that as a provisional practice, as a mental, spiritual yoga, it's a powerfully transformative practice, a training device to help us to learn something very important. So you can try to do as I did many years ago, to literally practice this extreme practice of always assuming that whatever happens, you're at fault and no one else ever is. To actually try not to see the faults of others and only to see your own fault on all occasions. And if you do, as we can't help it, we see the faults of others, as soon as you notice that, you drop that and you turn the light toward yourself. Now, I think a lot of us do this psychologically, naturally, and I'm not talking about that way of feeling guilty about everything and blaming ourselves about everything, which a lot of us do anyway. This is something different. That's a habit, a psychological habit that comes from our conditioning, which is reinforcing whatever lack of confidence or self-denigration we may already have. I'm not talking about that. And so if you have that habit, maybe this is not a good practice for you. But it's an interesting practice to think about as a training device. And it really revolutionizes the way you see the world and the way you understand the world. It makes it a different world. So it's like, when you do yoga, for the purposes of conditioning your body, you put your body in some pretty weird positions, right? You wouldn't be in those positions, say if you were on the subway or the bus. You wouldn't be twisting yourself up in that way, standing there like this or something like that. But you do it because it's good for your body. It conditions the body and opens up parts of the body, right? This is exactly the same thing. Spiritual yoga. So, for those of you who would like to take that up, I recommend it. It's very interesting. You find out a lot of things. So that was the practice of the sixth ancestor. He only looked at his own faults. He didn't see the faults of others. Would be nice to be around somebody who never saw the faults of others, huh? Wouldn't you like that? It'd be nice. To somebody who looked at you and could not see a single thing wrong with you, genuinely thought that you were a wonderful person. I'm sure that the sixth ancestor was like that. From that practice, he would be like that. And this Shenhui's saying, it hurts and it doesn't hurt. This is also a good practice. It hurts, and we want to feel the hurt, the physical hurt, the emotional hurt. Otherwise, as he says, we would be like as if we were dead if we didn't feel the pain. But also, we want to be free of the pain that we are feeling. Free of the clinging to the pain, free of the blaming of the pain, free of the trying to get rid of it. So in this way we can appreciate self and others, and we can be happy, and we can love with a minimum of entanglement if we can feel the pain but not grasp the pain. And in a way I think the sixth ancestor's practice of seeing and not seeing is also like this. In other words, it may not be that he literally doesn't see the faults of others, it's just that he sees others as they are, but he doesn't see that as a fault. He doesn't cling to those faults. Yes, she really is, and I need to straighten her out, because she's this way and that way. No, he might see the person, but after all, to say something is a fault, is an imperfection. That's an interpretation already, right? That's a view of something. To see something is not to see a fault, it's just to see something. So I think when he says, I don't see, what he means is I see, but I don't call it a fault. He lets go and returns everything to presence. So I wanted to take some time, probably more than I should have taken, to share with you some of these wonderful sayings of the Sixth Ancestor Sutra. And it's very difficult, as we all know, to control the world. Have you tried this? It's really hard work. And I don't mean things like, the economy or the government. Never mind about that. I'm talking about the people in your house. It's hard to control them. Or even, the person in your body. It's hard to control her, too. So, and this is what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to control the world. Why doesn't what I need appear for me now? Where is it? Where is she? Where is he? Where is it? Why is it not here? What is going on here? How come she has got what she needs, but I don't? Why is that? Why am I not yet the person I wanted to be? What happened here? Why not? She is. He is. They are. What happened to me? This is a very hard way to live. It's difficult. It's painful. The sixth ancestor is basically telling us, you don't need to live like that. You really don't. It won't work out. Just return to the presence of your perfect life. And you can learn how to do that by sitting down on your cushion, coming back to your breath, and whatever is in your mind and heart, whether you like it or not, whether it's good or bad, whether it's profound, stupid, whatever it is, it's okay. Just let it be there and it goes away. And that's a miracle. This is a miracle, that it arises in you, that it goes away. What more miracle would you want? You need a Western paradise better than that? This is a miracle. And if you learn how to do that on your cushion, and it takes a long time, as we know, to come back over and over again and just allow ourselves to be what we are. If you can learn how to do that on your cushion, little by little you can learn how to do that in your life with others. And you will see how miraculous this is. People will love you for it. And you'll love them. And then you really will be in a paradise. A world in which there are friends everywhere. In which you don't need to expect things from others because everything is already given on every occasion. This is a great world. And this world can be produced just by your not going forward and trying to grab something you think you don't have, but by stepping back into what you are. So this simple, direct teaching that the sixth ancestor is speaking about is really profound, and it's completely available to each of us. So I hope that you will have confidence in it, and that you'll continue your practice and find out, verify, for yourself the truth of these words of the sixth ancestor. So thank you all for listening and for being here this weekend. My wife is in Brussels. Somehow she decided to go to Brussels for the weekend. Thanks to my tremendous stash of frequent flyer miles. She can go anywhere she wants. And so one of our sons is in Brussels at an opening of an art show, I think I told some of you. So it's kind of a wonderful thing because she is going to have Mother's Day with her son. And this is great. And it just so happens that many other friends are also going to be there with them. And at first I thought to myself, well, why aren't I there? How come I'm not there? But I'm glad that I was here this weekend and have been here this weekend because you're my mother. And I really felt, this weekend in meeting all of you as if I was being taken care of by my mother. So thank you all for that. It's been a wonderful Mother's Day. And I'm your mother too, I guess. So we can have Mother's Day together. So I'm very happy, actually, to have been here. And I'll be here for a little while longer. So let's not forget that. Let's please continue for the rest of our short retreat. Thank you.